Savannah drifted back to consciousness, a bitter metallic tang coating her tongue. Thirst clawed at her throat, a wave of nausea churned in her stomach, and her head throbbed as if a rock band was rehearsing inside. Or was the thumping coming from around her? At first she couldn't place her surroundings, only that she was lying down, utterly confined. She tried to shift, a small, involuntary movement, and sheer, unadulterated terror clamped down on her like a vice. Her feet hit something solid, unyielding. Her space was narrow, oppressively so. Slowly, agonizingly, her mind began to clear, but the thoughts that swirled were heavy, leaden. Her vision swam, a blurry, unfocused nightmare. Panic, cold and sharp, surged through her again. With a trembling, weak right hand she fumbled, her fingers brushing against fabric? Satin? Behind it, a hard wall she couldn't budge. No, it couldn't be. Was this real? Was she in a coffin? Savannah felt the world spin, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She tried to scream, but her vocal cords were paralyzed, her lips barely parting. A silent, horrified gasp was all she could manage. The effects of some powerful drug, she realized dimly, had allowed someone she knew, to pull off this macabre, deadly trick. Easy now, darling. A man's voice, sickeningly familiar, purred from somewhere beyond her wooden prison. Ethan, her husband. Almost there. Just a little further down this charming, bumpy road. A jolt, and the vehicle, a van, she guessed from the engine's rumble and the crude suspension, came to a halt. The driver's side door creaked open, then slammed shut. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Then, a grinding metallic screech that sent shivers down her spine despite her drugged state. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom mixed with a sliver of desperate hope. Salvation? Or something worse? What fresh hell awaited her now? She could hear hushed voices outside, the scrape of tools. Oh God, they were really going through with it. This wasn't some twisted prank, some extreme experience Ethan had cooked up. This was cold, calculated, and utterly terrifying. She had to stay calm, had to think, but the lingering fog in her brain and the sheer horror of her predicament made coherent thought nearly impossible. The air in the coffin was growing stale, thick. Each breath was a labor. With a grunt and a thud, the coffin was carefully, or so it sounded, unloaded and placed on the ground. Now, Savannah felt truly helpless, a terrifying premonition gripping her. She'd thought it couldn't get worse, but the chilling finality of being lowered to the earth, even if not yet into it, sent a fresh wave of despair washing over her. She was on the verge of losing consciousness again, the cruelty and unpredictability of what was unfolding overwhelming her senses. "Put her right here," a man's voice commanded. Ethan, her beloved husband. Beloved? The word tasted like ash in her mind. "What is this, Ethan? Some kind of sick joke?" Savannah screamed internally, her body still too unresponsive to obey. He'd always loved extreme sports, his gifts always unconventional, his sense of humor often falling flat. But this had crossed a line into pure, unadulterated evil. She clung to a desperate hope that any second now they'd burst out laughing, pull her out, and this nightmare would end. "Finally, the bitch is where she belongs," a woman's voice drawled, dripping with a smug, almost theatrical satisfaction. Melinda, Savannah's friend. Why? The question slammed into Savannah with the force of a physical blow. Her heart, already racing, seemed to seize. A searing pain, not physical but a deep, soul-crushing ache, accompanied a blinding flash of understanding. Ethan and Melinda, they were in it together. They had never truly loved her, never truly been her friend. They had conspired, united by a dark purpose, to kill her, to erase her. "I can't believe we actually did it," Ethan's voice was clearer now, closer. Savannah felt a faint breeze caress her skin as, with a soft groan of wood, the coffin lid was lifted. Air, precious air, rushed in, and she could breathe a little easier, though the drug still made each inhalation a conscious effort. Her chest rose and fell so shallowly, it would have been imperceptible to a casual observer. She fought every instinct to gasp, to sit up, to scream. She had to play dead. Her life depended on it. "I've been waiting for this day for so long," Melinda cooed. "She won't be a problem for us anymore, darling. She's gone. Savannah could practically hear the possessive way Melinda would be taking Ethan's arm, though she couldn't see it. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. It wasn't just about the money, though that was surely a huge part. This was a love affair, a sordid, treacherous betrayal that had driven them to this. "We're lucky her old man kicked the bucket just last year," Ethan muttered, his voice lower now, clearly worried the gravediggers nearby might overhear. "If it weren't for his illness, we'd have had to deal with him too." A scuffling sound, then a low whine and a series of sharp barks, tangled with the legs of the conspirators. Walter, the elderly cemetery worker, had a mutt, Buddy, who was usually better behaved. "Can you shut that damn dog up, Walter?" Melinda snapped, her voice laced with irritation. "Can't you see we're having a moment here, paying our last respects?" The hypocrisy was staggering. "Sorry, ma'am," Walter's voice, gravelly and apologetic, replied. Savannah imagined herself bolting upright, screaming, terrifying the two villains who were about to consign her to a living grave. But she didn't dare move a muscle, not even flicker an eyelid. Who knew what Ethan would do, now that he was so close to seizing her family's entire fortune? Desperate people, consumed by greed or rage, were capable of monstrous things. And with the kind of money Ethan was about to inherit, he could bury 3 people in one grave, and likely get away with it. It dawned on Savannah that only these 2 vipers had come to her funeral. They hadn't notified anyone else, it seemed. Smart, in a sickening way. Flashes of her life reeled before her eyes, a sped-up movie montage, happy moments, sad moments, all now rendered meaningless. A strange sense of resignation began to settle over her. Where could she go? What could she do? And even if by some miracle someone found her, what about an autopsy? An investigation? Melinda leaned over, her face close to Savannah's. Savannah could smell her expensive, cloying perfume. God, she looks awful. Not even human anymore. More like a creepy doll. "Don't worry," Ethan soothed her. "Savannah didn't have any close relatives left in this town. And besides you, who were her friends here, really? Those drugs metabolize quickly. No coroner will find anything suspicious. I've taken care of everything, trust me. I didn't go to all this trouble just to screw it up on some minor detail. I've been planning this for a long time." Hearing that, a surge of fury coursed through Savannah, so potent she almost flinched. She quickly reined it in, terrified that any strong emotion might cause her to sweat or her complexion to change, giving her away. Then they'd kill her for real, no doubt about it. "When will you guys be done?" Ethan addressed Walter and his younger partner Leo. "Another 20 minutes, maybe," came a voice from the edge of the freshly dug pit. "All right, let's get out of here," Ethan said, draping an arm around Melinda's shoulders. "No need to watch the final act. I want to go to that new steakhouse. This whole ordeal has left me famished," Melinda complained in a petulant tone, smoothing down her stylish leather trench coat. She was dressed for a fancy dinner, not a burial. Walter had thought the moment he'd seen the glammed-up woman arrive. Melinda took one last look at Savannah's face, nestled in the pale blue satin lining of the coffin, and a small, triumphant smile played on her lips. She turned to Ethan. He settled up with the gravediggers, then they walked away, eager to distance themselves from the corpse and Buddy's incessant, mournful barking. "Strange folks," Leo muttered, voicing what Walter was thinking as Ethan's luxury SUV sped away. They weren't exactly broken up about this woman, were they? No flowers, no tears, not even a proper goodbye. "Kid, I've seen a lot in my years on this job," Walter said, watching the car disappear down the cemetery lane. "But people like that, rare. Probably some poor orphan, no one to miss her. Nice car, though." He turned his attention to his agitated dog. "Buddy, quiet now. Get away from there." The large mutt, usually obedient, was acting out. Today, he was weaving around their legs as if they were smeared with bacon grease. After Ethan and Melinda's departure, Buddy began to howl and bark directly at the coffin lid, which they had just placed back over Savannah's still form. Walter sighed and tied Buddy to the nearby fence with a short length of rope. "Just stay put, you old rascal, before you knock one of us into that hole." He then turned to Leo. "All right, let's get her lowered. You can head off after that. I can handle the fill-in myself. You sure, Walt? That's a lot of dirt. My body's used to the aches and pains, son. Barely notice it anymore, Walter said with a sly grin. He was fibbing, of course. He just wanted some peace and quiet, to be alone with his thoughts. Leo was a good kid, but he chattered endlessly, and Walter, at his age, found it exhausting. Funerals had become routine for him. The initial shock of the job long since faded into a grim acceptance. Once the heaviest part was done and the coffin was settled at the bottom of the grave, Leo grabbed his backpack. See you tomorrow, Walt. Walter nodded, then looked down at the dark lid of the coffin. He picked up his shovel and began to push earth over the edge. That's when Buddy truly lost it, howling with a sound that wasn't his own, a desperate, mournful cry. Will you shut up? Walter yelled, annoyed, not pausing in his work. Suddenly a black blur. Buddy had snapped his tether and with a frantic scrabble, launched himself into the grave, landing on the coffin lid and scratching furiously at the wood. Buddy, are you crazy? Get out of there! Walter shouted, exasperated. The grave wasn't terribly deep yet, but the dog paid him no mind. He barked and whined, insistent, demanding Walter pay attention. What in the Sam Hill is wrong with you? Inside the coffin, Savannah heard the thump as Buddy landed. The dog wasn't giving up. For the past few minutes she'd found she could make small, moaning sounds. It was those faint, desperate noises that had driven Buddy into a frenzy. What is it, boy? Walter, thoroughly spooked now, carefully climbed down onto the coffin lid beside the frantic dog. Okay, move aside, he commanded Buddy. With considerable effort, Walter heaved the lid open once more, and froze. Two wide, terrified gray eyes stared back at him. The eyes of the woman who, moments ago, was supposed to be dead. Mother of God! Walter crossed himself, his hand trembling. Savannah tried to speak, a garbled, incoherent sound escaping her lips. My darling, how? Walter, recovering slightly, helped her sit up. He stared at her, his own eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. They're gone? She managed to whisper, tears finally streaming down her pale cheeks. Who? Oh, them? Walter sputtered. Them low-down, rotten? He bit back a string of curses. We need to get you to a doctor. How are you feeling? We gotta call an ambulance. Right now. Savannah took a deep, shuddering breath, the fresh, earthy air a balm to her lungs. She stretched out a trembling hand, trying to stop Walter, who was already fumbling in the pockets of his grimy work pants for his ancient flip phone. No, don't call anyone. Please, it's not safe. All right, whatever you say, miss, Walter said, his voice gentle despite the shock. Come on, let's get you out of this place. Savannah couldn't control her sobs as she grasped the edge of the grave, Walter's strong hands pulling her up. Emerging onto the surface, surrounded by tombstones and countless portraits of the departed, made her feel even worse. She could have been one of them today. Only a miracle, and this kind man's dog, had saved her. Get me away from here, she pleaded, collapsing to her knees and covering her face with her hands, unable to bear the sight of the cemetery. Walter hesitated for a moment. The woman was clearly hysterical. He couldn't just leave her there while he tidied up the gaping grave. He'd deal with that later, in the pre-dawn hours when no one was around. The ride in Walter's beat-up work van, the same one that had likely transported her coffin earlier, was surreal. She was still reeling. Just last night, she'd been having dinner with Ethan in their luxurious two-story house, a home inherited from her parents. And today, she'd nearly died at his hands. He'd clearly slipped something into her wine. She remembered feeling sleepy, then nothing until the terrifying awakening. Yesterday had been their third wedding anniversary. Ethan had specifically suggested a quiet night in. No fuss, no outside attention. That's not like you, Savannah had laughed, looking teasingly into his eyes. You usually love to make a splash-best restaurant, live music, maybe even a string quartet for congratulations. I'm used to you going all out. Don't pressure me. I barely managed to resist. Ethan had leaned in and kissed her. For you, by the way. Oh, I really appreciate your desire to please me. She'd giggled. Just the two of us on such an important day for us. It's the best. He'd even claimed he'd sent the chefs home early and cooked everything himself. Savannah recalled Ethan's deceitful words from the previous evening with a fresh wave of revulsion. Had he ever been sincere with her? How long had they been planning this? And Melinda? How could she stab her in the back, wish her dead? Melinda had come from a middle-class background but had only ever befriended the wealthy kids in college. They weren't incredibly close, but they saw each other a couple of times a month, religiously. Entering Walter's small, cluttered groundskeeper's cottage on shaky legs, Savannah barely registered its humble furnishings. She just needed to sit. "You'll feel better in a bit," Walter promised, putting a kettle on an old-fashioned stove. "I'll make you some hot tea with herbs. I'd offer something stronger, but right now you need a clear head. Besides, mixing booze with whatever drugs they gave you, not a good idea." I can barely think straight," Savannah pressed her temples. "My husband, he pumped me full of some poison. My brain feels like mush." She looked at Walter, her eyes pleading. "You're the only one who knows I'm alive, and I don't want anyone else to know. Not yet. You're the only one who can help me. Please. I need to borrow some money. I'll pay you back, I swear. I was very wealthy. That's why they tried to kill me." She finally said the words aloud, deciding not to shy away from the horrifying truth. Walter stared at the miraculously saved stranger, a slight daze clouding his weathered features. He'd seen some strange things in his years working at the cemetery, but nothing, absolutely nothing like this. What kind of person, in their right mind, would even conceive of burying someone alive? Especially their own wife? "He looked like a real slimeball, your husband," Walter finally said, shaking his head as he looked at Savannah's distraught face. She was trembling from the residual stress and a burning, righteous anger. "I'll lend you some cash. Don't you worry, honey. Can't just leave you in a mess like this. But what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," Savannah admitted, her voice shaky but firming with resolve. "But one thing's for sure. That bastard will pay for this. I'll make sure they both get what they deserve. Trying to kill me, and in such a barbaric way." Fresh tears welled up as she remembered the events of the past day. How could I have been so trusting? Buddy, who had been dozing on the floor, got up, padded over to Savannah, and rested his heavy head on her lap. "Oh, you good boy," Savannah whispered, stroking him between his ears. "I didn't even thank you properly, you silly old mutt. You're the one who saved me." The dog's tail thumped contentedly. "Buddy's a smart one. Gotten used to him over the past 7 years." Walter smiled, also patting his furry friend's black back. "Wouldn't guess what a tiny runt he was. Fought him off a pack of strays. His mama was nowhere to be seen. Stray animals often wander into the cemetery, you know. Folks leave food on the graves. Buddy got caught in the middle of a turf war. Big dogs were about to tear him apart. I barely managed to chase them off with my shovel." Walter's own heart had been pounding that day. He couldn't just walk away. "Took him home. Thought I'd find him a good family. But he was such a licker, such a charmer, I got attached. For my line of work, a helper like him is perfect." "He's lucky to have you," Savannah said, scratching the contented dog behind the ears. He closed his eyes in pleasure. "I think I'll get a room at a motel for tonight. It's a bit cramped here for guests." "All right." Walter got up, went to a drawer, and pulled out an old wallet. "Here." He handed Savannah a few bills. "Should be enough for now. I'll call you a cab, get you there without any trouble." After checking into a dingy motel on the edge of town, the only place she could get a room without ID at short notice, Savannah found sleep impossible. The day's horrors were too vivid. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren made her jump. What if Ethan found out she'd escaped? What if he and Melinda were already looking for her? But most of all, Savannah wrestled with how to bring her treacherous husband and former friend to justice. She needed to be smart, cunning. She tossed and turned on the lumpy bed for most of the night, only managing to drift into a fitful sleep as dawn approached. And with the first light, an idea began to form. She arrived back at the cemetery early and headed straight for Walter's cottage, but he wasn't there. Walking among the graves after yesterday's ordeal sent a fresh chill down her spine. To think her life could have ended at just 29. "Walter!" she called out, her voice louder than she intended. After a second try, she saw Buddy bounding towards her, tail wagging furiously. "Hey there, good boy!" Savannah patted his glossy fur, and he pranced around her, nudging for more affection. "Where's your owner?" Following the dog, Savannah found Walter by an old, overgrown grave, wrestling with thick weeds that had choked the entire plot, from the headstone to the rusting fence. "So, you've got a plan?" he said without preamble, not even looking up from his work. "Yes," Savannah replied, "but I'll need your help." "Figured as much," Walter grunted, still yanking at a stubborn root. Savannah sat down beside him on the damp earth and awkwardly began pulling at the weeds, her movements clumsy. She'd never done this kind of work before, but there was something strangely calming about the repetitive action. "Here, use this trowel," Walter offered, handing her a small garden tool. "Just don't whack your own leg with it. So what's the grand scheme?" "We need to scare Ethan," Savannah began, her voice low and conspiratorial. "You need to call him, tell him you know his secret. Say you saw me move, saw that I was alive before you covered the coffin. If he tries to deny it, tell him your partner Leo knows too. Then Ethan will have no choice but to try and buy your silence. Demand a large sum of money. When you meet, get him talking. Get every word on a recording. It's not complicated, as long as Ethan is talkative." "Oh, he's a talker, all right," Savannah snorted. "Loves to brag. He bragged about marrying me to the whole town. Then his buddies would hit me up for loans." A grim smile touched her lips. "This will all be on tape, and I'll be hiding nearby. My appearance will be the final nail in his coffin, so to speak." "Clever girl," Walter mused. "Worth a shot. We need that scoundrel to confess. I'll do my best. I still have his number. I'll call him as soon as we're done here." He agreed, though a flicker of apprehension crossed his face. Half an hour later, Savannah, Walter, and Buddy were huddled in the small, cluttered groundskeeper's cottage. The air was thick with anticipation. "Okay, here goes nothing," Walter sighed, pressing the call button on his ancient phone and holding it to his ear. His hand was surprisingly steady. "Hello?" he said, his voice a little hoarse. "Mr. Thompson? Ethan Thompson? We need to meet. We need to talk about how you buried your wife alive. 4 o'clock this afternoon. My cottage at the cemetery. I'll text you the sum." He listened for a moment, then hung up. "What did he say?" Savannah asked anxiously, watching Walter wipe a bead of sweat from his brow. "Just okay," sounded scared, didn't even argue. For extra insurance, Walter called Officer Miller, a local cop he knew and trusted. Miller was a good man, dedicated to his job and always willing to listen to citizens' concerns and investigate properly. "So you're claiming your husband attempted to murder you?" Officer Miller clarified after Savannah, his voice carefully neutral, but his eyes wide with astonishment as she recounted her harrowing tale. "Well, he's certainly inventive, your husband." "You'll see for yourself soon enough, officer," Savannah assured him. Together, she and Officer Miller scouted the area around the cottage, finding a discreet spot where she could hide without being seen by Ethan. Then, they waited. Punctually at 4, Ethan's sleek black sedan pulled up. He swaggered into the cottage, closing the door behind him. "Well, old man, you don't waste any time, do you?" Ethan sneered, a condescending smirk on his face. "Took you a whole day to decide on blackmail?" "Never had a chance like this fall into my lap before," Walter replied, barely controlling the fury simmering beneath his calm facade. He wanted to tear Ethan limb from limb for what he'd done, yet here the monster stood, grinning like Walter was some kindred spirit. "Here, and keep your mouth shut." Ethan tossed a heavy gym bag onto the table. "If word gets out, I'll know who to blame, and the next grave dug on this land will be yours." "But why'd you do it like that?" Walter asked, his voice thick with emotion he was struggling to suppress. "That's a terrible way to die." If your wife woke up down there?" He could barely get the words out, meeting such profound, remorseless evil for the first time in his life. This wasn't just a criminal. This was a monster. "Hoped she'd suffocate in her sleep," Ethan confessed, his voice chillingly casual. "Miscalculated the dose, I guess. drugs must have worn off sooner than expected, but it doesn't matter now. It's done, and you're my accomplice. You try to turn me in, you'll go down too. Besides, he scoffed, who'd even care? Savannah was an arrogant, spoiled brat, never treated me like an equal, so she got what she deserved. Ethan turned, opened the door, and froze. Standing before him was Officer Miller in full uniform, and beside him, alive and radiating righteous fury, stood Savannah. You won't get away with this, Savannah spat, and with a resounding crack, her hand connected with Ethan's cheek. For a split second, Ethan looked stunned. Then his eyes darted towards the cemetery gates. He bolted, making a desperate dash for his car. Buddy, get him! Walter commanded. The black dog shot out like a cannonball, leaping onto Ethan's back, sending him sprawling. Buddy latched onto Ethan's expensive trouser leg, tearing and growling. Get this stupid mutt off me! Ethan shrieked, flailing on the ground. Get it off! Well, that just leaves Melinda, Officer Miller said, calmly handcuffing the subdued Ethan. We've got the whole conversation recorded. He smiled, pulling Walter's old phone from his pocket, which had been recording everything. It's all here. These lowlifes won't wriggle out of this one. With Ethan and Melinda in custody, a wave of profound relief washed over Savannah. She could finally breathe, testify without fear, and await the trial that would bring her tormentors to justice. She made sure her lawyers requested she be spared from seeing them during pre-trial hearings. She couldn't bear their deceitful apologies or crocodile tears. Ethan, at least, didn't feign remorse. He was pure, unadulterated greed and cruelty. Melinda, however, had put on a theatrical display when they'd accidentally crossed paths in the prosecutor's office hallway. My dearest Savannah, forgive me. It was all him. He made me do it, Melinda had shrieked, clutching at Savannah's sleeve. I swear I wasn't myself. You know I'd never— Get her away from me! Savannah had snapped at the accompanying officer. I don't want to see her face. Please ensure we are kept separate. Returning to her parents' grand, empty house was bittersweet. The first thing Savannah did was succumb to a long, healing sleep. The past few weeks had been a blur of calls from the D.A. quote, S office, endless questions, and the disbelieving sympathy of her household staff. We're all so relieved you're all right, Miss Savannah, said Maria, the head housekeeper, speaking for all the staff. Ethan had always seemed a bit off to them. Thank you, Maria, I'm doing okay, Savannah had smiled, genuinely touched. And thank God for that. She knew with absolute certainty that without Walter's courage and Buddy's loyalty, she wouldn't be alive to see justice done. Of course, she'd immediately repaid the money she'd borrowed, but as she resumed control of her family's affairs, Savannah felt that wasn't nearly enough. She felt an overwhelming need to truly repay Walter and Buddy for their selfless intervention. She drove to the cemetery keeper's cottage in the enormous white luxury SUV her father used to drive. It made her feel closer to him somehow. Well, look who it is, Walter exclaimed, coming out to meet her, a warm smile on his face. Thought you'd forgotten all about us old folks. Is that what you think of me? Savannah laughed, giving him a warm hug. I brought you some goodies. She handed him a large bag filled with gourmet treats and imported coffee. Well, come on in then, let's have some tea, Walter said, shooing a happily barking Buddy. Buddy, settle down. Don't trip up our guest. Savannah settled at the small table, designed for two, and watched Walter arrange the treats. She knew he had a son, Timothy. They'd spoken about him once, briefly. Timothy had disappeared years ago, gone to work a remote seasonal job up north. Alaska, she thought Walter had said, and never returned. A raw grief had tinged Walter's voice when he'd shared that. Even after 7 years, the pain of his only child's disappearance was clearly immense. He rarely spoke of it. What good would it do? It wouldn't bring his son back. Walter didn't even know if Tim was alive or dead. Not a single word from him in all those years. Uncle Walter, Savannah began carefully, using the affectionate term she'd started to use for him. What if I tried to find your Timothy? Walter froze, mid-pour, a kettle of hot water in his hand. Savannah pressed on. I'm serious. I'll spare no expense. You saved my life, Walter. You weren't afraid for yourself. How can I just let that go when I have the means to help you now? I have money, connections. This town still remembers my father's name. If I pull the right strings, maybe I can find out what happened, why no one was ever held accountable for his disappearance." "Oh, I wouldn't go poking around in that, child," Walter said, his brow furrowing. "What influence could you have up there? That's a whole different world." "So what?" Savannah insisted. "Give me a chance. I'll do everything I can. I won't give up. I genuinely want to help. If I had any doubts about my ability to do this, I wouldn't even bother you with it." Savannah threw herself into the search for Timothy with fierce determination, hiring a team of seasoned private investigators. "Pay whatever it takes," she instructed them, authorizing a generous advance. "If money will loosen tongues, use it. If Timothy is alive, I want you to find him, even if you have to dig him out from under the earth itself." The search concluded much faster than she had dared to hope. Armed with a thick manila folder, Savannah rushed to Walter's cottage the moment the lead detective handed over his final report. "Walter! Uncle Walter!" she called, knocking urgently on his door late one evening. He opened it, looking surprised and a little worried by her unexpected late-night visit. "What is it, child? What's wrong?" It's your son," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she pulled a photograph from the folder. It showed a man in a hospital bed, pale and gaunt, lying under a thin blanket. "This is Timothy." Walter snatched the photo, his hand shaking violently as he peered at the familiar, yet changed, features. Age and hardship had etched harsh lines onto his son's face, but there was no mistaking him. What happened to him?" Walter whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "He was working on a logging crew up in a remote part of Alaska," Savannah explained gently. "There was an accident. A load of timber shifted and he was crushed. He's been an invalid ever since. Timothy is in a state-run care facility. It's a very isolated place. Not many people live out there. Your son is a ward of the state, Walter. But he's alive, and we can bring him home." Walter said nothing. He simply pulled Savannah into a tight, shuddering hug, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Relief, so potent it was almost painful, washed over him, swiftly followed by a wave of guilt. How could he have lived his life, however somberly, while his child was out there, injured and alone? "I'm such an old fool, an idiot," he sobbed. "I should have tried harder, done more to find him." "Don't blame yourself, Uncle Walter," Savannah said softly. "You couldn't have known. And navigating these systems, it's nearly impossible for one person. These state agencies, sometimes they only work if you kick them hard enough. They don't like dealing with complicated cases. So many people lie in those places for years and no one ever contacts their relatives. It's just negligence, indifference." "We need to arrange transport," Walter said, his voice thick with urgency. "Please, Savannah, help me see him. Help me bring my boy home." "Of course," Savannah replied, her own eyes moist. "We'll fly out together. And we'll come back, the three of us." The preparations for the trip were frantic. Walter had to call on old friends to look after Buddy while he was gone. He was a bundle of nerves, oscillating between a desperate hope and a gnawing fear that Timothy might not forgive him for the years of silence. As they stood outside the ward door, Walter froze, overcome with a sudden, paralyzing terror. "Don't be afraid," Savannah said gently, taking his arm. "Tim will be so happy to see you." She led him into a stark room with 4 beds. Their eyes met. Timothy, gaunt and pale, stared at his visitors, confusion clouding his gaze. Then recognition dawned. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. Walter clapped a hand over his mouth, a choked sob escaping him. "Oh my God! Son!" "Well, go on, hug him," Savannah urged, gently pushing Walter towards his son's bedside. She smiled as father and son clung to each other, wordless, communicating through choked sobs and the desperate grip of their hands. Savannah herself struggled to hold back tears. The other patients in the ward watched with a mixture of envy and quiet smiles. Many of them, too, were victims of circumstance, dreaming of someone loving them enough to seek them out, to accept them, injuries and all. Later, on the flight back, Walter held Timothy's hand tightly. "Son, why didn't you ever write? I'd given up hope you were alive." I was ashamed, Dad, Timothy mumbled, looking away. My legs, they don't work. I'm a cripple. I figured you'd be better off thinking I was dead than knowing I was a burden. You always wanted me to do well, to have a good life, and I was stuck working at the cemetery, living in poverty. Forgive me for that, Dad. Forgive me. There's nothing to forgive, son, Walter cried. I'm just so glad to have you back. I'm not blaming you for anything, Dad, Timothy said, his voice stronger. I was going crazy from loneliness and the monotony. My legs don't obey me. I'm an invalid, useless to anyone. We're going to get you checked out at the best clinic in the city, Savannah interjected firmly. They're much better than the local doctors up there, believe me. They'll tell us if an operation is possible. So let's not lose hope. Excuse me for asking, it's a bit personal, Timothy began hesitantly, turning to Savannah. But who are you to my father? His rich young girlfriend? What in the world are you saying? Have you no manners? Walter sputtered, mortified. Did I raise you to talk like that? No, it's okay. Savannah laughed, amused by the exchange. Your father did me a huge favor, Tim. He saved my life. She smiled, then leaned her head back, deciding to rest. She knew the doctors in their city could help Timothy. Her own father had been a significant philanthropist, helping medical institutions acquire cutting-edge equipment. She hoped they'd be happy to repay that old debt when she reached out. A few days later, Dr. Henderson delivered the news after reviewing Timothy's extensive test results. Yes, surgery is definitely an option. And you know what? You'll walk again, maybe even run, but in any procedure like this, there are risks. We have to acknowledge that. Unfortunately, no one can give guarantees, but your chances of a full recovery are very, very high. Thank you, doctor. How many months is the waiting list for the operation? Tim asked, eager to get back on his feet. Waiting list? Dr. Henderson chuckled good-naturedly. We'll operate on you next week. You'll stay for observation, of course. During the surgery, Walter and Savannah paced the clinic corridor anxiously. Time seemed to crawl. Oh, when will this be over? Walter sighed loudly, glancing at the clock above his head. Just then, a nurse hurried out from the operating room. We need a blood transfusion urgently. What are your blood types? Hearing Savannah's answer, the nurse beckoned her. We need to hurry. As a cotton ball was pressed to the vein where they'd just drawn blood, Savannah was surprised by the doctor's next words. You and Timothy have the same rare blood type. In small towns like ours, that's quite uncommon. It's just a thought, but you might consider a DNA test. Back in the day, maternity wards, well, babies got mixed up. Sometimes accidentally, sometimes not. Savannah didn't want to worry Walter with the doctor's suspicions. Not yet. After all she'd been through, after nearly dying a horrific death at the hands of people she'd trusted, nothing would truly surprise her anymore. She wanted to do the test, but she needed to discuss it with Timothy first. A few days later, when Tim was moved from recovery, Savannah smiled at him. Hey there, welcome back. Dad, Timothy said weakly, seeing Walter holding his hand. Everyone was overjoyed. The operation had been a success. Though Tim faced a long rehabilitation, no one was complaining. With Timothy's consent, the DNA test was done. Savannah unfolded the envelope containing the results in his hospital room, with Walter present. According to these results, she announced, looking from one man to the other, you're my brother. Walter stared. I knew it. Or at least I started to wonder when you, he looked at Savannah, mentioned the DNA test. My wife, Catherine, she died in childbirth when Tim was born. I couldn't believe such a monstrous thing could happen. I raised hell at the hospital, threatened to go all the way to the state capitol with complaints about their negligence. But what could I really do? It wouldn't bring Catherine back. Walter's face was etched with a deep, abiding sorrow. Being a single father was incredibly hard, especially back then, end of the last century. Tim needed a mother's care. We were expecting twins, you see, a boy and a girl, but the doctors told me the baby girl was stillborn. They didn't even bring her to me, said they didn't want to traumatize me further after the news about Catherine. I was out of my mind with grief. I couldn't believe it. But eventually, I accepted it. My adoptive parents are gone now, Savannah explained sadly. I can't ask them how it happened, but I knew them. They would never have knowingly taken another couple's child. If your parents were influential and wealthy, Walter concluded, a grim understanding dawning, the hospital staff might have decided to swap our girls themselves, to avoid serious consequences. Faced with my grief and rage versus the potential wrath of your powerful father, they chose to hurt me. So, Savannah breathed, looking between them, you're my father, and my brother, my real family. She had always dreamed of having a brother, and now she did. It was a shame they'd met after so many years, but fate, in its own mysterious way, had finally brought them together. After Tim's rehabilitation, and once the sensational trial of Melinda and Ethan concluded with guilty verdicts and lengthy sentences, Savannah could finally breathe a true sigh of relief. I want to visit Mom's grave at the cemetery, she told Walter and Tim one afternoon. I never even knew her. I'll go with you, Tim said, gently taking her arm. It's been too long since I visited Mom. 7 years at least. Savannah cherished her newfound family. Having lost her adoptive parents and then betrayed so cruelly by her husband and best friend, the loneliness had been a heavy cloak. But now, she wasn't alone anymore. She couldn't understand why Walter and Tim refused to move into her sprawling mansion, preferring their cramped one-bedroom apartment. Honey, what would we do in a place like that? Walter would say, whenever she brought it up after they'd visited. We're simple folk. It's not for us. You get on with your life, start a family. You'll need that big house yourself. Yeah, Savannah, Tim would chime in. We're not freeloaders. Thanks, but we don't want to impose on your kindness. Well, at least let me buy you a cozy little house, she insisted, already browsing online listings. Something comfortable, with all the modern conveniences. We can pool our money. I'll just add a little extra. An early morning call from the district attorney's office shattered her fragile peace, yanking her from sleep. Miss Thompson! The detective's grim voice crackled over the line. Ethan Parker escaped during a prison transfer from county jail to the state penitentiary. What? Are you insane? What kind of sick joke is this? She snapped, sleep instantly vanishing. He overpowered a guard with 3 other recidivists. It's possible he might try to seek revenge, Miss Thompson. We're warning you. Double-check all your doors and windows. She immediately put her household staff on high alert, instructing them to report any suspicious individuals near the property. You need a bodyguard, Maria, her housekeeper, suggested, her face pale with worry. Yes, of course. Savannah felt a wave of dread. Her mind, numb with panic, hadn't immediately jumped to that obvious solution. Living so recklessly. The first bodyguard candidate arrived. Before him, Savannah had interviewed 3 others and had been thoroughly unimpressed. They'd all been overly eager, practically fawning over the young, wealthy, and suddenly single heiress. But 30-year-old Jarek was different. He didn't try to play the hero. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that had once been handsome but was now marred by several prominent scars. Don't be alarmed, he said up front. They're from a fire. I used to be a firefighter. Got a lot of injuries in my first few years on the job. Thought it was my calling, you know? Rushed into every blaze, ignored the rules, paid the price. He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought. My wife left me too. Dumped me as soon as she realized these battle scars were permanent. I try to cover them with creams and stuff, but I'm no expert. They're still noticeable. He caught himself. Oh, sorry. Got sidetracked. Your house needs a panic button system, direct line to the police. In your situation, it's essential. Well, that's excellent. No one else suggested that. Savannah smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. She'd found the right person, her personal protector. They talked for another hour. Jarek explained how he worked. Savannah detailed her situation and what she expected from him. I don't know how long it'll take them to catch my ex-husband, she said. But I was wondering, would you be able to live here in the house? I don't think I can sleep knowing there's no one else around. Ethan knows this house inside and out. Of course, Jarek replied. No one's waiting for me at home anyway. I'll pick a room for myself on the ground floor. No one will get past me to reach you. With Jarek's arrival, Savannah felt significantly calmer. Honey, maybe you should move in with us. Walter insisted, visiting Savannah almost daily. It's cramped, sure, but we can protect you better. Your house has too many places to hide. With us, everything's out in the open. No, Dad, thanks. I'll stay here, Savannah said stubbornly. Jarek knows his job and I feel safe with him. Well, he is quite the strapping lad, Walter winked. Dad, Savannah blushed, feigning indignation. Just saying, her father chuckled. Wouldn't want to be separated from him if my brother and father were around when such an Apollo is close by? Savannah didn't want to admit it, but Jarek was indeed striking. His scars didn't bother her at all. In fact, they told a story of courage. There was such strength and confidence radiating from him that she simply wanted to be near him. Being constantly together, they talked a lot, like old friends. Jarek could hold a fascinating conversation, but his gaze always remained focused, vigilant. I warned you, it's better not to go to the office, Jarek repeated sternly one day, when Savannah once again asked him to accompany her to the firm her adoptive father had founded. If there's something important, have your subordinates courier documents or email them? And aren't you supposed to do what I say? Savannah arched an eyebrow, not expecting such pushback. My job isn't to obey, Miss Thompson. It's to do whatever it takes to keep you alive. And if I have to lock you in a closet to do that, I will, he replied evenly. Suddenly, Savannah burst out laughing. Oh my God, she gasped, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. No employee has ever spoken to me like that. For the first time, Savannah saw a flicker of surprise in Jarek's usually stoic eyes, and she felt a small thrill of satisfaction. After that, he seemed to relax a little more around her, realizing his employer wasn't some capricious, spoiled heiress who looked down on everyone. The weeks passed in a state of unnerving tension. Savannah couldn't understand why Ethan hadn't been caught yet. Was he really that elusive? She mused over a now familiar breakfast with Jarek. He turned out to be surprisingly good at making hot sandwiches, while Savannah herself rarely bothered with even the simplest dish. To avoid endangering her staff, she had given them paid leave, remaining alone with her bodyguard. Lately, she'd noticed more and more awkward silences stretching between her and Jarek. It hadn't been like that before. They used to chat freely. But now, a mutual attraction, unspoken yet palpable, had bloomed. Now I'm truly afraid for you, Jarek said one evening after dinner. He'd been quiet and irritable all day. Why do you say that? Savannah frowned, her heart clenching with a sudden, nameless anxiety. Because you're not just a client to me anymore, he admitted, his voice low and intense. I can't maintain a purely professional relationship with you. I like you, Savannah, a lot. I worry about you constantly, and I want to protect you. Savannah didn't know what to say. A storm of complex emotions raged within her. She understood Jarek's feelings because she felt the same way about him. Wordlessly, she threw herself into his arms and finally let herself cry, really cry. She hadn't wept like this in ages, always striving to be strong, to let no one guess how terrified she truly was. Her father and brother would never have left her alone if they'd seen her true state. Shh, I'll be here. I won't let anyone hurt you, Jarek murmured, holding her close. The fear of another betrayal receded. Savannah trusted him completely. Their days began to resemble the quiet routine of newlyweds. I propose a picnic, Jarek announced one sunny morning. We can afford a couple of days off. I've rented a little cabin by the lake. He grinned, his eyes sparkling. We'll take fruit, vegetables, something to drink, grill some steaks. It's beautiful out there. Yes. Savannah leaped onto his neck and kissed him. Let's pack. The night spent by the lake was pivotal for the lovers. It was then they surrendered to a true, deep intimacy. But the most terrifying part was their return to the city. Unseen assailants ambushed them. A sharp blow to the back of Savannah's head and darkness. Ethan, along with two escaped convicts, Peter and Eugene, had broken into the house during the couple's absence, anticipating their return. For half a day, they'd gorged themselves on Savannah's food, trashed the place, and then lay in wait. Jarek regained consciousness first. Savannah lay nearby on the floor, her hands bound. Ethan and his cronies were in the next room, already heavily intoxicated, their raucous laughter echoing through the violated space. "Well, well, look who's awake!" Ethan crowed gleefully, dragging his captive into the center of the living room to taunt him. "How's the hero bodyguard now, huh?" "You bastard!" Jarek snarled, and with an unexpected burst of strength, managed to sweep Ethan's legs out from under him. Ethan yelled in pain as his head cracked against the marble floor. His two thugs immediately pounced, delivering a brutal series of kicks to Yarek's stomach, chest, and face. Jarek decided it was better to feign unconsciousness, hoping they'd lower their guard. When they resumed their drunken revelry, Jarek found the strength to scramble to his feet and lunge for the panic button. As his finger slammed down on it, a searing pain shot through his side. One of Ethan's men had plunged a knife into him. Savannah woke up in a hospital, disoriented. She couldn't remember why she was there. Her head throbbed from the blow she'd received days ago. "Jarek? Nurse? Where's Jarek?" "You're awake," a nurse named Irene said gently. "Please lie still. I'll call the doctor. He'll explain everything." Soon Walter and Tim visited. "I asked you to stay with us," her father said through tears, kissing her cool hand. "My poor girl, we were so worried." "You really scared us," Tim added, perching on the edge of her bed. "Your Romeo is in the next room, but he's in a coma. They stabbed him in the side, lost a lot of blood. It's good you didn't see it." "No, if I had been stronger, I could have helped him." "Don't be foolish," her father interrupted. "You couldn't have done anything against those thugs. They were all caught on sight. They'll get even longer sentences now." Savannah was discharged relatively quickly, but for weeks she sat by Jarek's bedside, praying for him to wake up. The doctor's prognoses were grim, but Savannah clung to hope. She gently caressed her flat stomach. Just days ago, she'd learned she was expecting Jarek's child. Their one night of love had sparked a new life. Please let this baby not lose its father. "My love, come back. You have to know you're going to be a dad," Savannah whispered in Jarek's ear before leaving one evening. She often talked to him, believing her voice could somehow reach his consciousness, trapped in his still body. Almost at the elevator, Savannah heard the urgent beeping of monitors and hospital staff rushing towards Jarek's room. "Oh, God!" she cried, racing back. She found him thrashing, trying to pull a long tube from his mouth. Honey, calm down, it's okay," she shouted, but a stern nurse closed the door in her face. A few minutes later, they allowed her in. "Oh, Jarek," she said, her voice hoarse from tears. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." "I heard about the baby," Jarek rasped, his voice barely audible. "We're having a baby." "Yes, my love, we're having a baby." Savannah kissed him, tears of joy streaming down her face. "My ex-wife, she said I was infertile. We could never conceive," he murmured, doubt still clouding his eyes. "Maybe she was deceiving you? Taking birth control secretly? If she wanted to leave you, she might have done something like that." To the doctor's astonishment, Jarek recovered without serious long-term complications. He needed to come in for dressing changes for a while, but overall, he radiated strength. Savannah was hunched over her laptop at the dining table, reviewing some reports. "There you go again with that strange posture," Jarek said sternly, coming up behind her. "You need to move more, get fresh air, not ruin your back and eyesight like this." "Oh, you're such a nag," Savannah laughed, closing the laptop. "Better bring me that cherry and chocolate yogurt. We're hungry." "We need to get married soon," Jarek said, tenderly stroking her hair and kissing her before heading to the fridge. "While you're still comfortable in a dress. All the noise and a crowd of people might be too much for you later on." "By the way," Savannah smiled, unsure how to broach the subject, "I have a wedding gift for you. I consulted with a plastic surgeon. Would you consider an operation? They said it's safe. Your skin could be smooth again. I love you just the way you are, you know. I don't notice any flaws." Savannah looked into her beloved's eyes. "But you're self-conscious about the scars, aren't you? I've seen this surgeon's work. People he's helped are thrilled with his skill." "Wow," was all a stunned Jarek could manage. I never really thought about it, but for the wedding photos, maybe I would look better." Yes, the celebration took place almost 3 months later, after Jarek had fully recovered from the plastic surgery. All the guests on the bride's side could fully appreciate the striking attractiveness of the broad-shouldered groom. Savannah was helped into a flowing white gown that emphasized her figure and her small, neat baby bump. Seeing her, Jarek struggled to hold back tears of happiness. "You are unbelievably beautiful," he whispered in her ear, not wanting to embarrass the team of stylists who had worked on her. "Ready for the courthouse, my love?" "Of course, darling." Savannah took her groom's arm, and they walked towards the exit of the house. In the courtyard, her closest loved ones greeted them. Her father, her brother, old girlfriends, colleagues from the firm, and Yarek's close friends. Walking under their admiring gazes, Savannah felt like the happiest woman alive. Life was just beginning, and she wouldn't miss a single minute of it.